The rain outside felt deliberate, like the night itself was watching Ethan Walker make a choice he never imagined he'd face. The kitchen was too clean, too quiet, every surface wiped down except for one small thing that didn't belong, the condom wrapper, torn open with careless confidence. Ethan didn't feel rage. Rage would have been easier. Rage would have let him scream, break something, confront Lauren immediately. Instead, what filled him was calculation, the cold clarity that comes when you realize you've been slowly trained to doubt your own sanity. For months, every question he asked had been turned back on him like a blade. He wasn't a worried husband, he was controlling. He wasn't confused, he was projecting. Therapy language had become Lauren's shield, her weapon. Sitting there, Ethan understood something terrifying. Truth would never be given to him willingly. If he wanted answers, he would have to force reality to reveal itself, without accusation, without confrontation, without her words rewriting his memo. Pepper wasn't revenge. Ethan repeated that to himself like a mantra as he stood at the counter, staring at the object that would change everything. Revenge is loud, driven by ego, by punishment. This was quiet, surgical. A last resort signal designed not to hurt, but to confirm. He told himself he wasn't trying to trap Lauren. He was trying to free himself from the endless loop of doubt she'd constructed around him. If nothing happened, he'd know he was wrong, and he would live with that. Apologize. Repair. Become the insecure husband she claimed he was. But if something did happen, then the truth would exist outside her words, beyond gaslighting, beyond therapy jargon used like armor. Ethan knew the moment he made the alteration, there was no undoing it. No version of the future where he could claim innocence. Proof has a cost, and tonight, he was choosing to pay it. Why again, when Ethan placed the condom back exactly where it belonged, he felt something colder than fear settle into his chest, finality. This was the moment his marriage stopped being about love and became about evidence. He smoothed the wrapper, aligned it perfectly, erased every sign that he'd ever touched it, because he understood how narratives work. Lauren was better at them than he'd ever be. If he left even a hint of interference, the story would once again become about him, his paranoia, his obsession, his supposed instability. As he stepped back, the kitchen looked unchanged, innocent even. But Ethan knew better. He had crossed the invisible line where a man stops asking questions and starts preparing for consequences. He wasn't proud of what he'd done. He wasn't relieved. He was resolved. And as the rain continued tapping against the glass, one thought echoed with brutal clarity. If he was going to be called crazy anyway, then sanity required certainty. No matter the cost, Ethan Walker grew up believing that silence was survival. In his childhood home, a raised voice wasn't a conversation. It was danger, a warning that chaos could erupt at any moment. He learned quickly that questioning, arguing, or defending himself led to escalation, and the safest response was to withdraw. This ingrained behavior carried into adulthood, shaping the man who became a methodical software QA analyst. Ethan prides himself on patience, structure, and careful reasoning. Confrontation terrifies him, not because he lacks courage, but because the emotional cost seems unbearable. He prefers to observe, catalogue, and process, often at the expense of his own needs. In love, he equates patience with devotion, believing that enduring discomfort quietly preserves relationships. But in his marriage with Lauren, this flaw becomes both shield and trap. The more he retreats, the more space she has to manipulate, to twist interactions, and to dictate the pace of intimacy, leaving him increasingly isolated in the very home that should feel safe. Lauren Walker is a study in controlled charisma. A marketing consultant by trade, she thrives on perception, both hers and how the world interprets her. She knows how to read people, anticipating reactions, and shaping interactions to her advantage. Empathy, for her, is a tool rather than a genuine expression. Words like "I understand" or "I just want what's best" carry the weight of strategy, capable of twisting guilt or doubt into submission. She craves validation, not necessarily love, and has learned to weaponize the very language meant to comfort. In her marriage with Ethan, this translates to subtle dominance. Small criticisms cloaked as concern, gentle nudges masked as guidance. Over time, she becomes the social translator of their shared world, dictating not just public perception but private reality. Ethan, conflict avoidant and increasingly isolated from his friends, begins to second-guess himself, wondering whether he's truly misreading situations, or if Lauren's charm is quietly reshaping his perception of the marriage he thought he knew. 8 years together, for married. Ethan and Lauren's early relationship was quiet, mutual, and supportive. Dinners were unhurried. Arguments were rare. But the balance shifted subtly after Lauren's promotion, her new social circle, and the influence of coworkers who introduced her to a more image-conscious, performance-oriented lifestyle. Ethan's world constricted as friends drifted away, leaving him reliant on Lauren for social context, advice, and affirmation. Emotional isolation compounded his natural inclination to remain silent, creating fertile ground for doubt. Practical stakes, like their shared mortgage and discussions about starting a family, intensify the tension. Subtle signals begin surfacing. Lauren insists on a specific brand of condoms, guarding them carefully, even as intimacy wanes. Ethan notices, and a small seed of suspicion takes root. Why the insistence on control over objects that should be irrelevant to them? It's a quiet, almost imperceptible signal that something in their marriage has shifted, setting the stage for the moral and emotional choices Ethan will soon face. Ethan walked through the front door earlier than usual, expecting the familiar hum of empty rooms and the faint smell of Lauren's perfume lingering from the morning. Instead, he was greeted by a domestic scene that was too perfect. The shower ran with warm steam curling beneath the bathroom door, the bed smelled freshly laundered, and the laundry machine was mid-cycle with a new load that hadn't been started by him. Lauren greeted him with a calm, almost rehearsed smile, as if nothing unusual had happened. The perfection itself unsettled him. Routine doesn't lie. Every detail screamed subtle deception, like the house had been sanitized of truth. In that moment, Ethan's pulse quickened, not with anger, but with acute awareness. Something in the rhythm of their lives had shifted. His years of methodical observation now flagged anomalies, tiny disturbances in the pattern, each screaming a silent warning. He realized instinctively that this was a pivot point, the calm before revelation. Lauren's explanation was effortless, rehearsed. She had been on a Zoom call while he was away. The words were calm, controlled, but Ethan's instincts refused to accept them. He waited until later to check the shared router logs, a habit born from years of professional curiosity. His heart sank as an unfamiliar device had connected during the exact time she claimed to be working. Confronting her gently seemed logical, but the attempt backfired spectacularly. Lauren's demeanor shifted like flipping a switch. She accused him of spying, of betraying her trust, and even threatened separation. Words like emotional abuse hung in the air, thrown with precision to destabilize. Ethan felt the familiar tension of gaslighting coil around him, a memory of childhood fear resurfacing. The truth, he realized, was now inaccessible not because of deception alone, but because any attempt to extract it would be twisted against him, leaving him trapped in his own doubt. The final weight fell not with anger, but with a chilling clarity. Ethan understood that Lauren would never voluntarily confess. The truth would not be handed to him. Every interaction, every careful observation he had made, confirmed that reality was now something he would have to extract for himself. His mind drifted back to a Reddit story he had once read, a post about using subtle methods, not revenge, to uncover undeniable proof. Tonight, he realized, was that night. Calm replaced fear, and resolve replaced doubt. Every movement was precise, deliberate, surgical. When he reached for the condom, he did so without malice, without satisfaction, without even the adrenaline of confrontation. There was only the quiet certainty that, finally, he would know. As the night deepened and rain whispered against the windows, Ethan stepped into the point of no return, prepared not for retribution, but for the cold, unflinching confrontation with reality itself. Days stretched into an excruciating haze as Ethan mastered the art of invisible observation. Every movement of Lauren's became a potential signal. Every shift in her routine was a minor earthquake in his carefully catalogued world. He spoke as though nothing had changed, smiled, and made coffee, all while mentally recording tiny anomalies. Lingerie folded carefully but never worn at home, her phone disappearing into airplane mode during the night, the faint but unmistakable glow of distraction in her eyes. Lauren's behavior, once predictable, now resembled a choreography Ethan could not fully interpret. The outward calm masked an internal performance, each gesture polished for effect. Ethan felt the tension like a cord tightening around his chest. With every day that passed, self-doubt clawed at him. What if I'm wrong? What if I've imagined this? Yet deep down, each subtle clue, each ritualized act of secrecy, whispered the truth he feared to confront. His marriage had become a theater of deception, and he was both observer and participant. Ethan's mind became a battlefield. Every minor anomaly in Lauren's routine collided with his own principles of trust and patience. Guilt whispered relentlessly. What if his suspicions were wrong? What if he destroyed years of carefully constructed stability? Yet pride and self-respect refused submission. He knew the truth was being hidden from him, deliberately, and every small act of secrecy was a challenge to his intelligence, his intuition. The struggle between emotional restraint and moral indignation tore at him silently. At night, he lay awake, questioning his own sanity, reviewing every interaction, dissecting every smile, every seemingly mundane gesture. The fear of error battled the desire for certainty. But in the quiet hours, a resolution hardened. He would not be manipulated. He would not be gaslit into surrendering reality to someone else's narrative. Even if the cost was emotional isolation, even if it fractured what was left of their marriage, he would know. The breaking point came like lightning. Lauren returned home early one afternoon, her composure carefully maintained until she disappeared into the bathroom. Minutes later, a piercing scream shattered the quiet. Ethan froze, heart pounding, not from fear, but from recognition. When Lauren stormed out, frantic messages following immediately, blaming a faulty product, an allergic reaction, he felt no surprise. She never once sought his help. The pattern, the rhythm, the tiny signals he had been tracking converged into undeniable clarity. It wasn't anger that confirmed the truth. It wasn't revenge or observation. It was the simple, immutable fact of where she had been when the incident happened. The reality of her actions lay in physical space, incontrovertible and undeniable. Ethan's patience had been tested, his restraint stretched, and yet he felt neither satisfaction nor relief, only quiet, unshakable certainty. The emotional noose tightened, and the psychological game had reached a point of irreversible clarity. That night, Lauren stormed back through the front door, fury radiating from every carefully maintained gesture. Her voice, sharp and accusing, cut through the quiet house. Sabotage, control, emotional abuse. Each word was a weapon, hurled with the precision of someone trained to destabilize. But Ethan didn't flinch. He stood in the kitchen, calm, measured, as though the storm around him was nothing more than background noise. Slowly, logically, he explained how he knew she hadn't been home during the time she claimed. Router logs, discrepancies in schedule, small physical clues, all assembled like pieces of a forensic puzzle. He did not yell. He did not plead. He spoke with the quiet authority of a man who had spent months observing, calculating, and preparing. Each revelation hit with the impact of undeniable truth. Not anger, not vengeance, but irrefutable evidence. Lauren's fury met a wall of reason, and the room seemed to hold its breath, suspended between chaos and revelation. Just as Lauren's rage begins to waver, the twist lands with full force. Ethan reveals he already has more than just router logs. Phone location history, hotel receipts, and messages retrieved from a synced device. The puzzle pieces snap into place, leaving no room for denial. Lauren's eyes widen, the carefully crafted mask of control cracking. The person she had been involved with is exposed, a married co-worker, father of two, entangled in his own web of duplicity. Lauren hadn't been seeking an escape. She had been repeating a cycle of deception and secrecy. The truth is brutal and absolute. Her strategies, her manipulations, her gaslighting, all laid bare. The scales of power shift violently in the room. The woman who once dictated the narrative now recoils from the reality she cannot spin, and the man she thought she could control now stands unflinching, wielding facts rather than fury. Lauren's fury collapses into fear, subtle and immediate. The realization hits. Ethan is no longer emotionally reactive. He is prepared. Every manipulation she attempted has already been countered by his patience, observation, and calculation. The emotional pendulum swings entirely to him. He doesn't need revenge. He doesn't need to punish. His power lies in knowing the truth and refusing to be gaslit again. The atmosphere is taut, charged with irreversible change. A quiet apocalypse of their marriage lies. Finally, with measured clarity, Ethan speaks. I didn't trap you. I stopped trapping myself. The words hang in the air like the toll of a bell. They are not accusations. They are liberation, both for him and, paradoxically, for her. The night, once a theater of deceit and uncertainty, now settles into the stillness of undeniable reality. Ethan's calm contrasts sharply with Lauren's panic, and the moral victory is absolute, unspoken, and irrevocable. Ethan approached the end of the marriage not with rage, but with strategy and clarity. When he filed for divorce, it was on his terms, carefully documented and backed by months of meticulously gathered evidence. The router logs, synced device messages, and location histories became more than proof. They were shields against false narratives, ensuring Lauren could not weaponize accusations of abuse or manipulation. The legal proceedings were straightforward, almost clinical in their fairness, reflecting Ethan's methodical nature. Financial settlements were equitable, focused on restoring balance rather than punishing. There was no vindictive flourish, no public spectacle, only the careful dismantling of a partnership that had become toxic. For Ethan, this process was transformative. It was not about defeating Lauren, but reclaiming agency over his life. Justice was precise, quiet, and controlled, exactly what he needed to move forward without bitterness, leaving cruelty behind while ensuring that truth remained unassailable. As the divorce quietly concluded, Ethan noticed the ripple effect of truth in their shared circles. Lauren, once the orchestrator of social perception, found her carefully curated image unraveling. Credibility she had relied upon evaporated, and subtle whispers of her manipulation spread organically among colleagues and friends. Control of the narrative, once her strongest weapon, was gone. Yet Ethan didn't need to amplify the gossip or seek revenge. Observing from a place of quiet dignity, he understood that liberation wasn't about humiliation, it was about reclamation. His reputation remained intact, anchored in authenticity and calm resilience. Friends who had drifted away began to reconnect, drawn back by the man they remembered before isolation had taken its toll. In this social realignment, Ethan discovered a renewed sense of agency. Truth alone, without embellishment or vindictive force, was enough to shift the balance, restoring him to the center of his own life while dismantling the false control Lauren had wielded for so long. Ethan's true transformation was internal. Therapy sessions weren't about fixing himself. They were about reclaiming his voice, learning to set boundaries, and dismantling the silent habits that had enabled manipulation. In the quiet of a smaller, peaceful apartment, he found space to breathe, to reflect, and to reconnect with life beyond suspicion and fear. Old hobbies resurfaced, friends returned, laughter was no longer cautious. He pondered the lessons of his marriage, recognizing that kindness without boundaries is self-betrayal, and silence in the face of manipulation is a quiet surrender of agency. Growth, he realized, is not about vengeance or spectacle, but about self-respect and the courage to live authentically. By claiming his voice, defining his limits, and choosing fairness over fury, Ethan emerged stronger, not only unshackled from deceit, but empowered, fully capable of directing his own life with clarity, calm, and a profound understanding of emotional boundaries. Months had passed since the storm of betrayal and revelation, and Ethan now sat alone at a quiet cafe, a serene anchor in a world that had once been chaotic. The soft hum of conversation, clinking coffee cups, and gentle background music blended into a comforting rhythm that no longer triggered anxiety or suspicion. He sipped his coffee slowly, feeling the warmth seep into his hands, each sip a reminder of reclaimed peace. The chaos of manipulation, deception, and gaslighting had been replaced by clarity and calm. Gone was the tension that had gripped his chest for years. Gone was the constant mental cataloguing of routines and inconsistencies. Here, in the simplicity of morning sunlight filtering through large cafe windows, Ethan felt grounded. Every decision, every careful observation, every quiet act of patience had culminated in this stillness. He was free, not only from the marriage, but from the shadow of doubt that had haunted him for so long. As Ethan enjoyed the tranquility, movement caught his eye, Lauren walking past the cafe. She avoided his gaze completely, eyes fixed on the pavement, as if the weight of months of lies and revelations had hollowed out her confidence. No words passed between them. Silence carried more weight than any conversation ever could. In that brief crossing of paths, Ethan observed the subtle shift. The once commanding presence of manipulation and control was replaced by a fragile shadow of defeat. The power dynamics had reversed without spectacle or drama. He didn't feel satisfaction, nor gloat silently. Instead, there was a quiet understanding. The narrative had changed permanently. No confrontation, no vindication, only the undeniable reality that truth, when observed patiently and methodically, leaves no space for pretense or control. He returned his attention to his coffee, heart steady, accepting that the story had ended, not with rage, but with quiet resolution. Ethan's thoughts drifted inward, reflecting on the lessons etched by months of emotional turmoil. Love, he realized, should never belittle, diminish, or gaslight the person who gives it freely. Trust was not a gift to be assumed, but a currency requiring accountability and honesty. Silence, once a refuge in childhood and a misguided tool in his marriage, was revealed as a double-edged blade. It could maintain peace temporarily, but without courage and boundaries, it enabled harm. In this quiet cafe moment, he understood that his patience, observation, and moral discipline had not only brought clarity but preserved his integrity. The final truth crystallized clearly. The dissolution of their marriage wasn't about traps of vengeance, it was the inevitability of honesty meeting deception. And with quiet certainty, he acknowledged aloud in his mind, She didn't leave because I trapped her. She left because the truth finally had nowhere to hide. The words resonated, simple, viral, and unflinching.